थैंक यू सो मच। सबसे पहले तो मैं यूडीएसएफ का धन्यवाद करना चाहूँगी कि इस मौके पे जो हम आमतौर पर भूल जाते हैं या भूल जाने की कोशिश करते हैं, इस सभा का आयोजन किया है। और ये समझ के, ये देख के खुशी होती है कि आप जैसे यंग माइंड्स, यंग थिंकिंग माइंड्स are finding it interesting and making time amidst your end semester submissions and examinations. आप यहाँ इस वक्त इस शाम को हमारे साथ एकत्रित हुए हैं। It's very heartening, overwhelming है कि आप यहाँ आए हमारे साथ। जैसा कि आज का ये दिन है एक ऐसे महानुभाव की स्मृतियों को कमेमोरेट करने का, जिसने शायद हिंदुस्तान की हिस्ट्री को एक नई दिशा दी है। और इस दिशा में शायद इस दिशा का अनुसरण करने के लिए, जहाँ तक मेरी समझ बनती है, जहाँ तक कि मुझे लगता है बहुत आसान नहीं रहा होगा उनके लिए यहाँ तक कि इस दिशा को हमारे जनरेशन के सामने रखने के लिए। बाबा साहब भीमराव अम्बेडकर के बारे में बहुत कुछ कहा गया है, बहुत कुछ लिखा गया है, और मैं समझती हूँ कि यहाँ जो आप लोग बैठे हुए हैं, आपका अपना इंटरेस्ट शायद उनमें इस कदर रहा होगा कि इसीलिए आप यहाँ हैं। कहीं ना कहीं उन्होंने इस बात को बहुत ही सिंपल और सरल तरह से कहने की कोशिश की है कि जब हम इंसानियत की बात करते हैं, जब हम इंसानों की बात करते हैं, तो ज़रूरी ये हो जाता है कि हम क्या इंसानों को बराबरी का दर्जा दे रहे हैं, उनको बराबर होने की स्थिति में मान रहे हैं। और शायद वहीं से वो सोच पनपती है जब हम देखते हैं कि उनका जब काम शुरू होता है इस दिशा में। I'm sure I don't really need to go into the details of it. I have two very eminent co-panelists who are going to get into those details. मैं कोशिश करूँगी कि जो मेरा कार्य क्षेत्र है, जो मेरा एकेडमिक एरिया है, उसके तहत बाबा साहब की जो सोच रही है, जो उनकी इफ़ आई मे से भागीदारी रही है, मैं उस तरफ आपका ध्यान आकर्षित करने की कोशिश करूँगी। I don't really want to reiterate the kind of contribution he's made, not only by way of his drafting the constitution, but in the whole polity of the country, if I may say so. I wish to bring him out from that context and locate him in the discourse of health, for that matter, and I am consciously doing it. शायद वो मेरे लिए आसान है क्योंकि मेरा अपना कार्य क्षेत्र स्वास्थ्य के डोमेन में है। बाबा साहब की जहाँ तक कि हम पॉलिटिकल कंट्रीब्यूशन की बात करते हैं, आई एम श्योर यू वेल अवेयर ऑफ हिज वर्क, यू वेल अवेयर ऑफ हिज आर्ग्यूमेंट्स, और कहीं ना कहीं शायद उसी सोच के कारण आप सब लोग इकट्ठे हुए हैं यहाँ पे। बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो उन्होंने शायद स्वास्थ्य के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में कही हैं, समझी हैं और दुनिया को उसका रास्ता दिखाया है, हम उसको थोड़ा सा अंडरमाइन कर देते हैं उनकी पॉलिटिकल नुआंस को ध्यान में रखते हुए। और इसलिए शायद मैं ये कहना चाह रही हूँ कि जब हम बाबा साहब की कंट्रीब्यूशन की बात करते हैं, तो ये भी बहुत ज़रूरी हो जाता है कि हम उसकी शुरुआत एक ढांचे से शुरू तो करें, लेकिन उस ढांचे को संकीर्ण ना बनाएं, उसको एक ही सीमा में निहित ना रहने दें। तो स्वास्थ्य की मैं बात कर रही थी, और जैसा कि मैंने कहा, शायद मेरे लिए आसान होगा कनेक्ट करना। सबसे पहले मेरा अपना जो इंटरेक्शन हुआ बाबा साहब के काम को लेकर, और उनके काम को जब मैंने समझने की कोशिश की, और मुझे लगा कि वी हैव टू ब्रिंग हिम आउट ऑफ दैट डोमेन ऑफ द कन्वेंशनल थॉट विच द लार्जर एकेडेमिया, लार्जर डिस्कोर्स पोर्ट्रेज हिम एज द मेसिया ऑफ द डाउन ट्रॉडन। मेरे ख्याल से इस फ्रेज़ को कहीं ना कहीं हमें पीछे छोड़ के उनकी शख्सियत को इससे ज़्यादा आगे ले जाके देखना है, और तब हमें ये समझ में आता है कि आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में स्वास्थ्य का जो डिस्कोर्स WHO ने क्रिएट किया है, स्पेशली विमेंस हेल्थ को लेकर, वो बाबा साहब ने बहुत समय पहले कहा था। मेरे ख्याल से आप लोग वाकिफ़ होंगे माइका माइंस एक्ट से। आई एम श्योर आवर ऑनरेबल कोलीग फ्रॉम द लीगल फ्रेम वुड probably shed better light and more light on that. When he was a member of Viceroy's Council on Labor, way back in early 40s, 41, 42 to 46, right? That's when the observations on the condition of the miners was what compelled to commission a study examining how the mica mine workers were living, earning their livelihoods, what was their housing conditions. तो जब उस स्टडी के रिजल्ट्स आए तो ये बहुत अच्छी तरह से पता चला कि जो वर्कर्स हैं, ओके थैंक यू, जो वर्कर्स हैं माइंस में, उन्हें बहुत सारी सुविधाएं जो आम तौर पे वर्कर के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में होनी चाहिए वो नहीं है। ना सिर्फ वो नहीं है इन द सेंस कि उनको रहने की रिहाइश की कोई अरेंजमेंट नहीं है, उनकी सैलरीज़ या वेजेस कह लीजिए भी इतनी नहीं है कि उनका गुजारा अच्छे से हो सके। इसके साथ साथ एक बहुत अहम चीज़ जो स्वास्थ्य से संबंधित निकल के आती है कि इन वर्कर्स को रेस्पिरेटरी प्रॉब्लम्स थे, और रेस्पिरेटरी प्रॉब्लम्स होने के कारण उनका काम भी अफेक्ट होता था, और ना केवल काम माइंस में जो उनका फंक्शनल काम था वो अफेक्ट होता था, बल्कि उनकी निजी जो उनकी ज़िंदगी थी उस पर भी उसका प्रभाव पड़ता था। तो वहाँ से शुरुआत हुई इस बात को कॉन्टेक्चुअलाइज करने में कि अगर कोई भी इंडस्ट्री, कोई भी एम्प्लॉयर अगर किसी को एम्प्लॉय करता है तो ये उसकी ज़िम्मेदारी बन जाती है कि अपने एम्प्लॉयर्स की स्वास्थ्य की देखभाल का कोई ना कोई ऐसा प्रोग्राम बनाया जाए, कोई ना कोई इस तरह की स्कीम बनाई जाए जिसके तहत उनके स्वास्थ्य की सुरक्षा की जा सके। तो द एम्प्लॉयर्स थ्रू दिस द ऑब्जर्वेशंस बेस्ड ऑन दिस स्टडी perhaps for the first time in the modern history were made responsible for the health of their employers. और ये स्टडी ये तो बहुत ही मोटे तौर पे इस स्टडी का एक फाइंडिंग था जो पॉलिसी मेकिंग से इन्फ्यूज़ होता है। दूसरी अहम बात जो इस स्टडी ने हमें बताई उस टाइम पे in early 40s was also that women who were employed as miners have certain differential treatment to be meted with, because they had to be seen in the light of also the context of their gender, and therefore the realms of reproductive rights get built in when Dr. Ambedkar observes the conditions of those women. First thing perhaps which to my mind which I wish to share with you is the women and their entry into the dikes was something which was perhaps fairly conditional in terms of the hazardous nature with which they were being exposed. So something which adheres in context with the concern that this reflects of Dr. Ambedkar about women's health was that women should not be enduring this hazardous nature of the job by entering the dikes. Second thing perhaps which becomes fairly important and takes this whole acts realms further was the context of the benefits which women need to accrue as in their role of familial responsibilities. So as members of the population groups who had biological responsibility of procreating needed the maternity leave as well when they had to procreate. And therefore, the nuance of medical benefits, maternity benefits, which perhaps women of today are experiencing, actually is vested way back in the in the context in which Dr. Ambedkar examined and perceived the interests of women's health. The other, to my mind, a more interesting and more relevant point comes, and it contextualizes itself in today's time, is the very idea of reproductive health. We started talking about स्वास्थ्य की बात हमने मुखर होके कहना शुरू करा था आल्मा आटा कॉन्फ्रेंस के बाद. मेरे अपने कुछ छात्र यहाँ मौजूद हैं, मेरे ख्याल से वो अच्छे से कॉन्टेक्चुअलाइज कर सकते हैं इसको. आल्मा आटा कॉन्फ्रेंस वाज समथिंग विच टोल्ड अस दैट हेल्थ इज़ फॉर एवरीबडी, हेल्थ फॉर ऑल वाज देयर स्लोगन वे बैक इन 1978. तो अगर हेल्थ फॉर ऑल था तो यहाँ पे सोशल डिस्पैरिटीज़ इन एक्सेस टू हेल्थ केयर और हेल्थ इनइक्वालिटीज़ इटसेल्फ का जो अहम मसला था वो निकल के सामने आने लगता है. As late as 1978, when there was already an very categorical understanding and expression about these inequalities which were becoming visible way back in 40s when Dr. Ambedkar makes his observation on this very comparatively smaller group of population. जो WHO 78 में कहता है in terms of health in general and particularly in reproductive, in context of reproductive health. महिलाओं के बारे में हमने आज कहना शुरू किया when WHO kind of wakes up for the considerations for women's health by way of assuring right to health in terms of my body, my choice, my decision, etc., etc. Therefore, women's role in family building process, etc., etc. Dr. Ambedkar examined and addressed something which I think could have pulled a lot of variant strings. His observations in terms of physical disabilities gave a very nuanced realm to the whole idea of reproductive rights and reproductive choices way back in 40s, and that's the point I'm trying to draw at. His contention was that physical disability, or what we today contextualize as differential, differential abilities or whatever, differently abled bodies or differently abled populations. The context he was trying to draw towards what if the parents were suffering from any kind of disability, particularly physical or mental for that matter, raising the child could be an issue. And therefore, and also if the mother was suffering from any of these disabilities, or the child was born diagnosed to be disabled in any form, he proposed medical termination of pregnancy for the sake of the health of the women, unlike what we, with our obsession as a state in terms of the growing population, a lot of context has been made in terms of reproductive health and reproductive choices in the garb of women's health in order to address the growing population, quote unquote. But his vision way back in the 40s tells us that it's more important to address the health of the women, and therefore we need to think along the lines of the need to access certain ways through which medical termination of pregnancy may be made permissible, may be allowed for women. Right? So the point perhaps I'm trying to draw for us is not only in terms of taking up this kind of one reference vis-a-vis the Micah-Mines Act, which in fact this study which leads to the Micah-Mines Act subsequently. The point I'm trying to draw upon is the time lapse. His vision enables to think about this need way back in 40s. और जब हम actualization की बात करते हैं in many ways, other than the privileges or provisions which the Micah-Mines Act may have given us. Post-independence, it takes us so many more years to actually come down to actualizing any of these things. medical termination of pregnancy, PNDT, etc., actually come in force and become workable as late as 90s. Take another realm for that matter, and I want to probably make all of you think about it. Another realm which I wish to probably bring in is the context of Mahar Tank movement way back in 1927. I'm sure we all acknowledge it as something which was the quest for social equality. This was a movement which actually induces that fervor. We must claim our space in the equal fora. I want to draw attention towards one more thing. ऐसा क्यों हुआ कि सिर्फ पानी को लेके हमने इस इक्वालिटी की बात की? कहीं ना कहीं जहन में ये बात ज़रूर थी कि पानी ज़िंदगी के लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है. Safe drinking water is very, very important, and therefore the whole context of fighting for access to water from the tank needs to be also seen in the light of this very requirement of water, which in itself is life-giving element. And therefore, I think that to me is the spirit which gears the whole understanding of the need to perhaps construct this movement. And it's so appealing that each one of us would want to agree to it and be part of it. And I think that also triggers this whole, that bigness, if I may use that phrase, into that movement. And that also, therefore, tells us to the realms which I wish to bring in today's context by just one more maybe comparisons that I'm trying to draw. Today we have Swachh Bharat Mission. Swachh Bharat Mission ऐसा नहीं है कि 2014 से शुरू हुआ है. Schemes to ensure open defecation reduces, people have toilets, etc., have been there for a fairly long time. Perhaps CLTS is, one can say, is the beginning point. The concern for those who were engaging in scavenging, if I may use the conventional term, was shown fairly much earlier. In fact, in 20s itself, when he makes a point that the people who are engaging in scavengers, and there's a fairly well acknowledged quote from Dr. Ambedkar, which is trying to kind of suggest that the work, of course, is demeaning, but then you have to rise up to say no to this work. And to gather that strength to be able to say no to that work was where perhaps the intent was. If you want to, it's very cliched. If you don't want to agree to be bullied, no one will bully you. It's cliched for sure, but I think there is something which is, which is giving a very important kind of a message to it. Message is that you have to refute that bullying. And therefore, if I don't agree to do something which is demeaning, which is something which is, even restricting me to admit myself as a human being, has to come from me before somebody else can probably come in on that. Because if I am ready to be bullied, probably going by that same cliched attitude, you'll be bullied for sure. And I'm saying this with complete understanding of the fact when I want to bring in this realm of the scavenging community. He says all of this in 20s, if I recall my dates correctly. When do we start thinking about it? The first committee which was set up to think about these scavenging communities was in 1950s, the K.R. Malkani committees. The first report comes and says that, well, there are customs which are involved in engaging continuance of this set of people engaging in these activities, and therefore it's not only the people per se, the customs and the customary engagements also have to be addressed. Subsequent, I think another 5 years down the line, the second committee report comes of the same commission and informs that nothing much has changed. So we have through the 1950s 2 set of committees specifically for this community which is engaging in scavenging. We actually set up a task force as late as 1990s. And when do we pass the bill to prohibition of prohibiting the manual scavenging and rehabilitating? Perhaps 1983, and then perhaps 93, sorry, and then we work it out in 2013, right? Now, the point I am therefore making is the concern and the sincerity towards execution of this concern translates in a fairly different kind of a way. And this is a community which has been relegated to perhaps the bottommost level of the ladder. Why is this apathy towards these people? Look around our own selves. How do we treat those people who are cleaning the toilets, for example, our hostels, for example, and this very room, to bring ourselves close enough? We are apathetic towards them, right? And there is a sense of disparity that I'm better than you, and therefore you are relegated to be doing this part of work. I'm not the one who's supposed to be doing it. So I have the right to litter, for example. You have the duty to clean it up. What happened during COVID, for example? I have some time, right? 2 minutes. What happened during COVID? Everybody else was supposed to be sitting at home safe so that you don't get infected. We don't get infected with COVID, except for one set of people. And they were the cleaners who were engaging with the worst kind of, if I may say, material, engaging with it in terms of collection, disposal, etc., etc. We start talking about the masks to save ourselves from the wretched COVID virus. But these are the people, as more than workers, as people who have been relegated to engage in a particular kind of work. They were the last in the hierarchy to be considered for provisioning of the gadget equipments that were necessary. And these gadgets like masks, gloves, boots, etc., should be a mandatory part of their uniform, costume, whatever you wish to say. On paper, for sure they are. But those of us who've probably engaged in working with them will know how malfunctioning these gadgets are which are provided to them. That's what I can say from drawing from my own interaction with them through my work that I have. So I'll probably sum up by saying that to learn from what Dr. Ambedkar showed us the way to, say, decades ago, our responsibility today is to be conscious about the fact that how do we take this forward without being deterred by the notions which are putting us in ways such as, more in the fatalistic point of view, I can't do anything beyond this. And I will want to close by just remembering what Gujarat High Court ordered in terms of the alternative occupations for the scavenging communities, because they are the ones who are mostly engaging in sanitation work. One of the contentions in that judgment was that at least they are being given, they have some work to earn a livelihood as sanitation workers or scavengers. I would want to pose to the state the question, is state as so inefficient to not be able to provide a decent work for its citizens? And decent work with dignity is one of an important sustainable development goals that we are trying to achieve. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't overshoot.